Unknown. Lorm sang, The Curse of Blackwood Farm. For as long as anyone in the small town of Fairhaven could remember, Blackwood Farm stood abandoned at the edge of the dense, misty woods. Its weathered barn sagged under the weight of years, and the farmhouse itself was a looming silhouette against the pale moonlight, its windows like empty eyes staring into the abyss of the past. Stories of curses, disappearances, and unnatural occurrences clung to the farm like cobwebs, whispered in hushed voices at the local diner and school playgrounds. But none of those warnings stopped Daniel Carter. Daniel had grown up hearing the ghost stories, but he wasn't the superstitious type. He was a practical man, a farmer's son who had inherited his father's failing land and needed a fresh start. When he saw that Blackwood Farm was up for sale at a price too good to be true, he jumped at the opportunity. Ignoring the warnings of Fairhaven's oldest residents, he signed the deed, packed up his tools, and moved into the old farmhouse, determined to breathe life into its decaying fields. The first signs. The strangeness began almost immediately. The first night, Daniel lay awake in his bed, listening to the deep silence that blanketed the farm. Then came the whispers. Faint, indistinct voices drifted through the walls, like echoes of long-forgotten conversations. Thinking it was just his imagination, or perhaps the wind slipping through the cracks of the old house, he dismissed it. But the next morning, when he went out to inspect the barn, he found something that made his skin crawl. The doors, which he had left chained and locked, were wide open. Inside, deep claw marks gouged the wooden beams, as if something massive had tried to tear its way out. Straw lay scattered across the ground, forming symbols that Daniel didn't recognize but instinctively feared. Still, he shook off the unease and got to work. The unearthed truth. As the days passed, the occurrences escalated. Footsteps echoed through the halls at night. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision. He would wake up to find his furniture shifted, his tools missing, only for them to turn up in the strangest places. His hammer buried deep in the soil, his boots hanging from the rafters. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel visited the Fairhaven Historical Society. An old librarian, Mrs. Holloway, hesitated before handing him a tattered book filled with town records and old news clippings. Blackwood Farm has a dark history, she said in a whisper. It belonged to the Whitmore family. They were prosperous until their daughter, Eleanor, was accused of witchcraft in 1871. They say she cursed the land with her dying breath. Daniel read on, discovering that the entire Whitmore family vanished shortly after Eleanor's execution. No bodies were ever found, only their abandoned farmstead, left to decay under a shroud of mystery. The haunting intensifies. Armed with this knowledge, Daniel returned to the farm, now wary of every creaking floorboard and shifting shadow. That night, he was jolted awake by the distant sound of weeping. It came from the barn. Gripping a lantern, he made his way outside, heart pounding. The barn loomed before him, its doors swaying as if beckoning him in. Steeling himself, he stepped inside and froze. A woman stood in the center, her back to him. Her long, tattered dress swayed as if caught in an unseen breeze. Her hair hung in loose, tangled strands over her pale shoulders. "Eleanor," Daniel whispered. She turned. Her face was gaunt, her eyes black voids that seemed to pull the very light from the room. Her lips moved, though no sound came. And then the whispers returned, louder this time, surrounding him, pressing against his skull like an unbearable weight. Panicking, Daniel stumbled backward, knocking over a rusted bucket. The sound echoed through the barn, and the figure let out an unearthly shriek. The lantern flickered violently before extinguishing completely, plunging everything into darkness. The escape. Daniel ran. He didn't stop until he was inside the house, locking the door behind him. The whispers had followed him, growing into a chorus of tortured voices. Frantic, he tore through the book Mrs. Holloway had given him, searching for a way to break the curse. His eyes landed on a passage. Eleanor Whitmore's spirit is bound by the blood of the land. Only by returning what was lost may peace be restored. Digging. That was the answer. With renewed determination, Daniel grabbed a shovel and ran to the barn. He began to dig at the spot where he had found the strange symbols in the straw. Hours passed, the sky bleeding into dawn, but finally his shovel struck something solid, a wooden box. Lifting it from the earth, Daniel pried it open and gasped. Inside lay a bundle of decayed cloth, the remains of a skeletal child wrapped within. Eleanor's child, hidden away all those years ago. The air grew still. The whispers stopped. And then, as if carried on the morning breeze, Daniel heard a single, sorrowful voice. "Thank you." The aftermath. The hauntings ceased that night. The house was silent, the barn still. Daniel gave the remains a proper burial, marking the grave with a handmade cross. In the following months, the farm flourished. Crops grew where the soil had once been barren. The once cursed land was alive again. But even as he worked, Daniel never forgot the shadowy figure in the barn, nor the voice that had whispered its gratitude. Blackwood Farm would always have its ghosts, but now they rested in peace.